Mr. Gulen is a remarkable human being who came from comparatively humble background. Is a remarkable human being who came from comparatively humble background. All the chief goals of Islam and none of the I'm David Morse. I work as professor and head of counseling and educational psychology at Mississippi State University. My initial introduction to the Hizmet movement probably came for me about 2006 when the campus chapter at Mississippi State University of the Dialogue Institute reached out and was at that time being sponsored by one of my dear friends. And she actually extended the invitation to my wife and myself to join in with their activities. Shortly thereafter, in I think 2008, that translated into the opportunity to take a trip to Turkey and visit many of the Gulen-inspired sites, talk with many of the folks in many settings, in many cities, and just get a deeper appreciation of the faces and the names and the nature of the families that support the movement. The trip we took to Turkey was outstanding. It was, in a nutshell, a life changer for me because it opened my eyes to the idea of folks embracing a movement so sincerely, so profoundly, that not only would they honor it with their words, their deeds, their contributions, but it simply became a way of life, or it became an embodiment of the way of life that they had come to accept. It is a phenomenal network of friends that support the movement worldwide. My opinion of the Hizmet movement is that it's one of the most astonishingly effective implementations of trying to turn belief into practice that I've seen face to face in my lifetime. Clearly, there are many, many folks who have dedicated themselves to the movement. The ideals underlying the movement are very simple in form and yet very powerful at the same time. And most basic movements that are effective over time have that same principle or that same property. If you think of the civil rights movement in the United States, it was a very simple truth that sort of drove that all folks, no matter what their walk of life, no matter what their background, have the same rights and privileges, and those should not be impacted by any sort of government intervention. In the same way, the Hizmet movement has some very simple principles. The principles do mix religion, education, service together in a way that I think works remarkably well in a variety of settings. Mr. Gulen is a remarkable human being who came from comparatively humble background. Mr. Gulen, as I said, was a gentleman raised as a cleric who wanted to, from very early age, engage in outreach activities. And those outreach activities started off with very simple things. I think summer camps or the equivalent thereof, as we would characterize them in the United States, reaching out to children who probably couldn't, for whatever reason, given their economic circumstances or the availability of educational opportunities, couldn't progress perhaps as far or as well as they might have in a better circumstance. And so part of his outreach was ministering to their educational needs as well as their religious needs. And then from that came the dialogue movement, came the community of friends, came the informal networks of professionals in Turkey and in many other countries across the world, all seeking a better future. To me, it represents all the chief goals of Islam, and none of the pejorative thoughts that people have come to associate with Islam as a result of terrorist acts. If you look at the basic tenets of Islam, one of the chief features of I'm going to digress for just a moment, one of the chief features of the dialogue movement was the idea that folks from Jewish, from Christian, from Islamic backgrounds can come and share their common ancestry, certainly through Abraham, and then also be able to talk about their differences or distinctions. For example, one thing that many Christians don't know is that in the Quran there's an entire chapter devoted to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and that Jesus is recognized as a prophet in Islam. Many other prophets are recognized in Islam as well, and so there's one of the paths of divergence. But the fact of the matter is that the basic tenets of Islam about being respectful to whomever you honor as God, being respectful to your fellow man, living for a better tomorrow as opposed to today. I think those are acts that, or beliefs that anyone can embrace. In Western culture, the so-called golden rule, I think, captures that well, that you would do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think if people would just take the time to acquaint themselves with believers of other faiths, other religions, they would find that, guess what? We're more alike than we are different. The importance of Hizmet's interfaith activities are, I think, several. First, and perhaps most obvious, we have the idea that, as I was saying before, we're speaking of an inclusionary or an open arms approach to dealing with other people. In other words, we accept you for what you are. We can talk about our common beliefs. We can also talk about our common differences, and maybe in so doing come to a better understanding of one another. And to the extent that people choose to do that, decrease the likelihood that we will behave in an adversarial way. The emphasis in the Hizmet movement on education, I think, follows Gulen's notion that it is the lever that's going to propel society forward. And towards that end, anything that one can do to make it more available, to make it of better quality, and help students move successfully in the ladder towards matriculation to higher education and job opportunities is only going to serve to improve the economy, improve the society, and improve the cultural benefits all around. The Gulen-inspired schools are really a joy to see if you ever have the chance to visit them or read about them. The students that you see there, in some ways, they're like students everywhere else. Yeah, so it's not like they're different human beings. They're not different human beings. They're the same kinds of students you would encounter in any sort of school. But what is different is they are given opportunities that they might not otherwise have had. And the caliber of the instruction tends to be very good. The emphasis on STEM areas, science, technology, and engineering and mathematics, tends to be sound. There's the opportunity, since most of them are private in basis, there's the opportunity, if the local board or governing agency wants to do so, to imbue religious education as opposed to choosing to exclude it altogether. But the same is true in any kind of private versus public school setting. But at the end of the day, the academic successes that I've seen from several of the Gulen-inspired schools are just astounding. The students achieve well academically, and I think that will have only positive payback later on. Hizmet involves a wide variety of activities. Many of them would be captured under the umbrella term of charitable outreach or disaster relief and the like. In other words, relying heavily on volunteer labor. In this sense, the Hizmet movement is very similar to a lot of outreach programs, but what is being captured here is number one, again, the idea of being inclusionary, that everyone is deserving of assistance, not just some, or not just those in complete agreement with your belief system. Number two, the idea that that if you want to make a difference, it will involve some pay. And the pay it forward mentality is that of volunteering your services. American Red Cross in the United States is an example of one that relies heavily on volunteer service chapter by chapter. There's any number of other examples as well. But the idea is that it's one thing to espouse beliefs, it's one thing to write an occasional check in support of a movement or a specific activity that a movement might sponsor. But at the end of the day, if you're willing to step up and be a part of that, that speaks volumes for engagement and dedication and belief. What the Hizmet movement has to offer in a positive sense outweighs by manifold degrees any potential drawbacks that it might happen to have. But if you look at the presence of the movement, and the way people embrace it in the sense of at the local level choosing to establish a school for students, well, that doesn't happen automatically. That takes time, that takes effort, that takes money, that takes people, and that takes sustained devotion to the task at hand. Establishing a private hospital so that people will have better care. It's the same thing, except the level of money goes up, of course, because of the cost of medical treatment. In the sense of even offering banking opportunities, like the Asia Bank, it's the same kind of idea. Or having a newspaper which will take a broader vision of what the world is like, or sponsoring a television station which has a broader outreach than just what a specific government wants to hear or what just a specific faith movement wants to hear. I think those are examples day to day that touch the lives of many folks and represent the degree to which the followers of the Hizmet movement have genuinely embraced positive ideals, number one. Number two, they unselfishly involve in, from what I've seen, they selfishly involve themselves in a pay-it-forward sort of framework. And number three, these are people who have said, we have needs, and those needs won't fix themselves. We need to help fix them.
I think Hoja Effendi's inspiration for education, for interfaith dialogue, and also for service to our fellow human beings is the beautiful part of Hizmet.
I think the most important thing about the Hizmet movement and the Gulen movement is its openness and willingness to listen and talk and embrace other people.